Welcome class to Math 1030 handout video for Unit 5B. Should you believe a statistical study? Statistical studies are found in many news outlets in the media, whether in newspapers, they'll cite studies, whether it be in on the news program at night, or even online news sources. All cite statistical studies to show the news. And you can even read about them in your classes or any books or journals or anything like that. So there's the authors recommend 8 guidelines for evaluating a statistical study. First one, get a big picture view of the study. You should understand the goal of the study, the population that was under the study, and whether the study was an observation or experiment. Okay, so for the first one, we have understand the goal. Okay, we need to really think about what the goal of the study is, what it's trying to describe and to say. What is its goal for sharing what kind of information it was intended to, and to see if it actually did share what you understand its goal to be. Sometimes they don't share the goals. They actually state the goal and they share something else. You also need to understand the population that was under the study. Who are the people that the study is about? Is it about a certain group of people that would actually make sense to study? And you also need to think about whether the study was an observation or an experiment. Okay, that's also important because sometimes experiments are better as observations, and sometimes observations are better as experiments. Okay, so that will all help the believability of the results. Okay, so we investigate these studies to see the study setup and to see if the results of the study are reasonable. Okay, possible questions that you can ask when you're thinking about the big picture of the study. Again, we're thinking about the goal. Okay, and was the goal met? Was it reasonable for what they said, that the goal was met or not? What was the population under the study? Was the population clearly and appropriately defined? Okay, so they need to cite and talk about what the type of people they're asking and how many and everything. So all those play into the results of the study. Was the study observational or an experiment? Okay. If it was an experiment, was it single or double blind? Okay. Recall that single blind means that the participants in the study do not know whether they're part of the treatment group or the control group. They don't know whether they're getting the actual treatment or a placebo. Double blind means that the researchers don't know which participants are in which group as well. So double blind is a much more secure study. Number 6, what were the treatment and control groups? Were they properly randomized? Okay, so was it a random sample or was it a convenience sample? Convenience samples are usually biased. Okay, and the results are a little bit skewed. But properly randomized, they should have more believable and appropriate results. So given the goal, was the type of study appropriate? Okay, so we talked about that, about the goal and the appropriate study, whether it should be observation or experiment. Okay, so getting a big picture of the study is good, and we'll do some more of that in the next guidelines. Guideline number 2, we need to consider the source. Okay, so considering the source of the participants, we can find potential sources of bias on the part of the researchers. Okay, considering the source, who are the researchers, who are the participants, all those things need to be considered. An example for considering the source is a study on the effects of smoking by a tobacco company. Okay. So isn't it kind of interesting or curious that the effects of smoking is going to be a study done by a tobacco company? Well, tobacco companies are driven by money. All the companies are driven by money. The more money they have, the better they're doing, and the more money that they'll want. So anything that will impede their income, their revenue, is seen as a threat. Okay, and so tobacco companies want to minimize the alarming effects of smoking on people, and so they will conduct their own studies to show that smoking is actually not as bad as people think, and that there might even be some potential health benefits. Okay? A lot of times, smoking has been studies of smoking have been conducted by third-party companies, not by tobacco companies, but just by independent companies, or government agencies or National Institute of Health, and they have confirmed that smoking does indeed cause cancer, lung cancer, and so it's therefore unhealthy. Studies by the tobacco company could include studies that say, well, smoking is actually not that bad, it doesn't have as many effects, and smoking could actually be beneficial because it will suppress your appetite, it will help you lose weight, and things like that. So they will play down the actual ill effects of lung cancer and those types of diseases with the heart and with the throat and the lungs and the mouth. All of those things will be downplayed by them. So when you consider the source of the study, that is a potential source of bias. Okay. Number 3, look for bias in the sample. Okay. Decide whether the sampling method was likely to produce a representative sample. So our key is to see if their sampling method was representative. There's 2 types of biases here that are new: selection bias and participation bias. Okay. Selection bias is when researchers select their sample and it ends up being unrepresentative of the population, whether on purpose or not on purpose. Okay. So just like when you select all of the football team to find the average weight of a man in college, whether you talk about political opinions with just Democrats and things like that. So you gotta be careful of selection bias. Participation bias is when people choose whether or not to participate. Okay. One popular method to do studies or observational studies is with surveys. So surveys are very problematic because the only people that will fill them out are people who have a strong opinion of whatever the issue is for surveys. The surveys are notoriously famous for having a low response rate. Okay, before about 30%, like maybe 30 years ago or so, 30% of the surveys were filled out. But even today even less are filled out, maybe around 10%, and so that's a very small part of the population, and so that's a very small part of the population to have an opinion about something, and so it's very skewed. Surveys are also famous for issues with self-reporting. So people are self-reporting on a survey, and they will people, when they fill out surveys, want to present themselves in the best light. And so they are going to put down, let's say that they have a survey about if you recycle or not. Okay, people are going to put down, yeah, we recycle in our household, because they want to be seen or they want to portray themselves as somebody who cares about the earth and the environment and recycling. And so even though that may not be exactly true, they may tamper a little bit with their responses and inflate them a little bit to show themselves in a favorable light. Okay, so surveys you gotta be careful with those. Selection bias, participation bias. Guideline number 4. The authors suggest to look for problems defining or measuring variables. Okay, a variable is a piece of information that varies, or a statistic. Okay, so the statistics usually vary in the studies, and ambiguity in the variables can make it difficult to interpret reported results, meaning that they could be skewed. For example, there's a study that people have done relating the amount of exercise people get and resting heart rate. So the more exercise you get, the healthier you are, and therefore whenever you have a resting heart rate, whenever you're at rest, your heart rate is really low because it doesn't have to work so hard to pump blood through your body. Okay, so Amount of exercise is a variable. Okay, that's one thing you're studying. And resting heart rate is a variable because it varies among the people in the study. Now, so the ambiguity here is, what does amount of exercise mean? Does it mean walking 10 minutes a day? Does it mean going from your living room to the restroom? Or is it more intense than that, meaning that you go to the gym 3 times a week and work out for 30 minutes? Or you go to the gym 5 times a week and do the treadmill for 30 minutes? Those kinds of things vary widely in their in what could be considered an amount of exercise. Okay, so people who do more rigorous exercise will have a lower resting heart rate, but we don't even know what those are. Maybe that's what we would think, but maybe that's not even true. Maybe the resting heart rate will depend on other things, and that leads us into the next section of confounding variables. Confounding variables are variables that can interact with the ones you're studying, but be unknown to you as the researcher. A lot of times they're discovered later. And so we got to be cautious about confounding variables. So something that can, for example, interfere with resting heart rate. Maybe it's about diet. That can, if you have a good diet, you have a good resting heart rate. Maybe it's genetics that helps you have a good resting heart rate, and it's independent of the amount of exercise you get. Okay, so that could confound things a little bit and have people have better resting heart rates than they really would, just depending on amount of exercise. So confounding variables, another one that the book talks about, is a study relating radon and lung cancer. Okay, so the idea is that radon is a radioactive gas that can seep into the foundation of your home and into your basement from the surrounding land. As uranium or other materials like that decompose in the earth, they release gases, and those gases could come into your home, and they could be they're radioactive, so that means they're toxic. The study that could have confounding variables that the book talks about is there are high levels of radon typically in states like Colorado, lots of mountains. And in Hong Kong, for example, it's a city, and they don't have a lot of radon there. The lung cancer for a regular person or normal person, the chance for lung cancer is about the same in both Colorado and in Hong Kong. And so because the lung cancer is about the same in both countries, one might conclude that the effect of radon is negligible, or there is no interaction there with radon and lung cancer. And so that means that there's a confounding variable, probably could be in it, and that happens to be smoking. So with more careful studies, they found that radon does cause lung cancer, and that smoking was also something that causes lung cancer, but is a confounding variable. So things those are the confounding variables that happened later. Okay, and so they thought radon, and it wasn't a cause of lung cancer for a long time, but they found out that it was, and that the confounding variable was smoking. Okay, so gotta be aware of those things that can confound each other and cause more problems in the results than one might realize in the beginning. Guideline number 6: consider the setting and wording in surveys. Okay, in these studies questions, look for anything that might tend to produce inaccurate or dishonest responses. Okay, one might again here is where you can be careful of how you word questions. Wording questions is important because the way you word it will spawn different results in the surveys. Okay, so here's a question of an example here. Do you favor or oppose taking military action in Iraq to end Saddam Hussein's rule? Okay, so this could be from a while ago when Saddam Hussein was ruling Iraq. He was a dictator, and he did things that weren't good to his people, and many people in the United States wanted him to be brought out of power. Okay. So, yes, people are saying, well, yeah, we would answer this question, yes. We do favor taking military action to end in Iraq to end Saddam Hussein's rule. Okay, he's a dictator. We don't want him to do bad things to the people. We need to get him out of power. Okay, so this is a question that could be more leading, and wording is important. I like this in green. Do you favor or oppose, so here's another version of the question, taking military action in Iraq to end Saddam Hussein's rule, even if it meant that U.S. forces might suffer thousands of casualties? Okay, and so when this survey question was asked, the number of people that said yes went down because of the possibility that the question brought up, and that was the wording of the question, that thousands of soldiers might die. Okay, and usually people would say, well, we don't want to sacrifice thousands of our soldiers for one person. Okay, and so that's why less people answered yes on that question, the way it was worded there. Okay, so question and wording is important. A lot of surveys lead the participant into thinking a certain way, and we'll have some more examples of that in our example set. Number 7, Guideline 7 says to check that the results are presented fairly. Check whether the study supports the conclusions that are presented in the media. The book has an example on that with Colorado reading levels of students, of children. Okay, one study said that 28% of Colorado's children in schools do not read on level. Okay, and so many people were all in uproar for that. It's like we need all of our students to be able to read on level, 100%. Okay, and so we can see that the study didn't present the data from other states or how Colorado ranks compared with other states. That could be actually a good amount, and that more states have higher percentages of students that are not on reading level. And it might not be a good amount that more students have lower rates of students that are not on reading level, and so we wouldn't know. Okay, so the results need to be presented fairly. Stand back and consider the conclusions. Guideline number 8 is a lot like number 1. Evaluate whether the study achieved its goals. Okay, did the study achieve its goals? Do the conclusions make sense? Okay. Do they have practical significance? Can you rule out alternative explanations? Okay, you have to think about other explanations for having lung cancer with radon or resting heart rate. Okay, those are important to think about to see how strong the results are. Here's an example of practical significance. Okay, a study found that dietary supplement helped users lose an average of half a pound more weight. Okay? And so, should they even have said anything about this study? Well, there's not much practical significance because a half of a pound is very little, and people would probably rather not worry about doing a diet than to doing that one and only lose an average of half a pound more weight. Okay, so those are the guidelines for evaluating a statistical study. Okay, class, in this video, we have a number of examples of studies that we're going to assess and ask ourselves, should we believe the statistical study? We are going to use parts of the 8 guidelines, so 1 or 2 or 3 will apply to each of these little study blurbs that are on this handout. Okay, so let's start with number 1. More than 1 million people sent texts in response to a TV survey question. So this survey result is more valid than a survey of random sample of 200 people. Okay, so let's look at some of the parts of this description here. 1 million people, that's a lot of people, sending texts versus 200 people at random. Okay, and TV is also an important part here. So which one is better to have? Well, it turns out that a random sample of 200 people is better than to think about the results for 1 million people sending texts. Okay, so 1 million people sending text is biased towards those who have cell phones, okay, because it's what you use to text with. There are people out there that don't have cell phones, and so they will not have a chance to participate in this study. The next one is the TV survey question. Okay, TV survey question means that those who have watched the TV program were able to do this survey. There are people who do not have a TV, there are people who have subscription services like Netflix or Amazon Prime who do not watch regular TV. And so just a part of the population that watches TV is the one that will participate in the survey. And also survey results. So we have survey question and survey results. So survey, which means that you need to be careful of those who are, because it's a bias towards people who fill out surveys. They like to do it. They feel passionate about the topic. Okay, so in short, should we? Does this make sense? Is no. Okay, so I'm going to zoom in here a little bit. No, because the study is biased to people with cell phones, TVs, and I'm going to put live TVs, live TV, and surveys. People who like to fill out surveys. Okay, excellent. Number 2, the survey of religious beliefs suffered from selection bias because the questionnaires were handed out only at Catholic churches. Okay, that does make sense. Because if you want to talk about a survey of religious beliefs and you only talk to Catholics, you're only getting a portion of the total population of religious people. Okay, there are many more religions than the Catholic religion here on the earth. Okay, so yes, it does make sense because there are many more religions than the Catholics. With their religious beliefs. Okay, good. Number 3, my experiment proved that vitamin C reduces the severity of colds because I controlled the experiment for every confounding variable. Does that make sense? No, because one cannot control for every confounding variable. A lot of times the confounding variables are not discovered until years after the research. Okay, good. Number 4, everyone who jogs for exercise should try the new training regimen because careful studies suggest it can increase your speed by up to 1%. Okay. And so does this one make sense? No. Because why doesn't it make sense? So it can increase your speed by up to 1%, okay? Because apparently there were some people in the study whose speed did not increase so their speed increased less than 1%. or not at all. Okay. And 1% is a very small amount anyway, so it's impractical really to do this. Okay, the question for this section is based solely on the information given. Do you have reason to question the results or methods used in the following hypothetical studies? Okay. So number 5 says, a survey of hourly wages of fast food workers is in a large city samples 20 workers from each of the 10 fast food restaurants. Okay, so do we have reason to believe the methods? Okay, so it looks like that they're trying to do a nice sample from 10 fast food restaurants, but if this is a large city, then they might want to do more than that. So 10 fast food restaurants seems like a small amount. However, the methods are appropriate. We're going to assume that they do random sampling. Okay, so methods seem appropriate. If you do random sampling, random sampling was used, and 20 workers at 10 restaurants is representative. It might not be, but if it is, then that should be good. Number 6, an experimental double-blind study investigates whether people who skip lunch are more likely to feel tired in the afternoon. Okay, so because the study is experimental, people who skip lunch, and there's people going to be, those are the treatment groups, and the people who don't skip lunch are the control groups. Double blind is good because that way the researchers and the participants won't know if they're in the treatment group or the research group. Okay, and so yeah, the methods, there's no reason we have to question the methods. I'd say if self-reporting is accurate. We know that self-reporting is sometimes not accurate because they could lie. That they do skip lunch and they really want to skew the results and say, oh yeah, I'm so tired. Or no, I'm not tired at all. Okay. So no reason to question methods if self-reporting is accurate. A study by the Liberal Center for American Progress is designed to assess the new Republican budget plan. Okay, should we have reasons to question the results? Yes, on this one, a big one. So liberal is the key word here, and Republican budget plan. Okay, so the Liberal party is the Democrat Party, and Republicans are more conservative. Okay, so there is a possible bias. Because usually Democrats are liberal, and Republicans are conservative. They have different ideas about what to do for a budget, okay, and differ in budget approaches, budget philosophies. Okay, Liberals like to tax the people. Republicans like to not tax the people. Because of that, it'll have different effects on our federal deficit and debt. Okay, and so because they differ in their budget philosophies, the Liberals might not look favorably upon the Republican budget plan. Okay, number 8. A study financed by a major pharmaceutical company is intended to determine whether its new high blood pressure drug is more effective than similar drugs of competing companies. Okay. So, is there a possible bias? Yes, there is. Okay, why is there a possible bias? Well, we have major pharmaceutical company. Is it determined whether its new high blood pressure drug is more effective, okay, from competing companies. Now, this should draw red flags because a pharmaceutical company will probably be tempted or actually skew their results or their methods so that they have a favorable outcome. Let's say the company might skew their results or set the study set up. To make their drug favorable. Painted in a more favorable light. More effective light. Okay, good. So possible bias there because of the company. Consider the source. Number 9, a TV talk show host asks the TV audience to text 1 if they support and 2 if they oppose a law requiring background checks for the purchases of firearms. Okay, this one's like number 1. So we have a TV talk show host, we have a TV audience, texting. Okay, so what we should do is we should just be careful that there is participation bias here. Okay, participation bias because we have people that watch TV. People who watch TV and have cell phones and who are passionate about polls will respond. Okay, so that's only a part of a group of the population and is not representative to people who don't watch TV, like they don't have a TV at all, or they don't have they have like Netflix or something, and people who have cell phones because there are people who don't have cell phones. Number 10, a state Democratic Party polls its members to determine whether its candidate for governor is likely to win against the Republican candidate. Okay, so is there a possible bias? Yes. Because the poll will just have responses to that favor their candidate. And so yeah, they're gonna say that their candidate will win, and they're gonna say that the Republican candidate will win. Okay. So there is bias there. Number 11, researchers design 5 survey questions to determine whether Europeans are more optimistic than Americans. Okay. We would have cause to question, yes. So question the results of this study. Survey questions. Okay. Survey questions are self-reporting, and only a few people fill them out. So bias in survey questions, the use of survey questions, okay, and Europeans and Americans, okay, so Europeans and Americans are diverse, okay, and so they will have a different view on what is optimistic, okay. Optimism. Okay, so they'll have a different view on what is optimism. So those are the key parts of that one. Number 12, a government study is designed to determine the percentage of taxpayers who understate their income based on people who had their tax returns audited. Okay, so we don't have actually any question to, no reason to question the results. Because auditing, I think, is a random sample. Okay, so audit is a random sample. And if everyone self-reports accurate information, okay, I throw that caveat in there. Number 13, researchers conclude that the body mass index is the single most important factor in predicting the performance of world-class swimmers. Okay, so there are other factors that need to be considered, so we should question the results. Some confounding factors, maybe. Other factors, such as practice time, also can influence this. Can also influence their performance. Okay. Let me do a quick save real quick here. Okay. Number 14. In a study of obesity among children, researchers monitor the eating habits of the participating children and exercise habits of the participating children. They're carefully recording everything that they eat and all of their activity. Okay, so number 14, we don't have a question we don't have reason to question the results, but there are actually, think about other factors. Okay? So when you think about other factors that could contribute, alternative explanations, we might be able to question. Okay? So I'm going to say we're going to question the results because there may be alternative explanations. Like genetics, like family history or genetics, like disease, family history, okay, coming back here, sorry about that. That could affect their, wait. Okay. Number 15, sociologists studying alcohol abuse circulate a questionnaire asking each respondent, did you drink in excess this past week? Okay, so should we question these results? Yes, indeed. Question the results. Okay, because we have self-reporting is not accurate. Okay, especially when participants want to be seen in the best light. Okay, also, what does excess mean? Excess is different for each person. Okay, so we have that keyword there, excess. To gauge the number 16, to gauge the public opinion on whether there should be a constitutional amendment to ban capital punishment, a survey asked people, do you support legalized murder? Okay, so we should question the results of that survey. Okay, why should we question the results? The survey is asks a leading question. Because who would want to say, yes, I support murder? Nobody's going to say that. And so that's why they called capital punishment, they refer to it as legalized murder. Okay, so that's the big part there. So people are going to skew the results because of that. Nobody wants to see nobody wants to be seen in the light of someone who supports legalized murder or murder. Okay. And the book says that it doesn't reflect the underlying issue. Okay. So that's number 6. Going on to number 17, we have the new directions here, which say, based solely on the information given about the hypothetical study, decide whether you would believe the stated claim, and justify your conclusion. Okay. Number 17 says, an educational research group that tracks tuition rates finds that tuition at a particular small college is 50% more than it was 10 years ago. Okay, and so college tuition rates are published, and because of inflation, it could be twice as much, 50% more, so 1.5 times as much as it was 10 years ago. So it looks like that these claims are reasonable. Okay, number 18. A new diet program claims that 200 randomly selected participants lost up to 15 pounds in 6 weeks, and that the program works for anyone with enough discipline. Okay. It is a true statement if one person lost 15 pounds. The rest could have gained weight. Okay. That's the up to part, and you gotta be careful of that. The rest could have gained weight. And be careful of these weight loss statements, because men and women lose the weight differently. Different races lose weight differently. Different types of people lose weight differently, short and tall. Okay, so be careful with the weight loss statements. The program works. So here's another part. The program works for anyone with enough discipline. Okay. So what does that mean? Okay, what is enough discipline? What is enough discipline? Okay, what does that even mean? Okay, so we don't know. You can lose any amount of weight you want if you have enough discipline. Just keep exercising and eating right. Okay. So number 19, citing a higher incidence of deaths due to binge drinking among first-year students, the college president claims that banning drinking in student housing will save lives. Okay, so we need to think about, is the president's information reliable? Okay, is it reliable? They probably needs to, will save lives. Well, maybe that's all relative, because other things can happen. So what are some other possibilities? Other things can happen that could also not, that could not save lives. Okay. So are there other reasons? Okay, we need more information. Okay. Number 20, a spokesperson for a Major League Baseball team claims that the average attendance at home games is 45,236, which is up 12% over the previous season. Okay, that should be reasonable. Okay. Okay, it should be reasonable, but we have to be careful. of the team management inflating the numbers for sales and ads. Okay, they want to definitely sell more tickets, and so they're tempted to do that. Number 21. The local Chamber of Commerce claims that the average number of employees among all businesses in town is 12.5. Okay, so the local Chamber of Commerce is probably not going to distort data. Okay. So chambers of commerce will likely not distort their data. So it should be good. A car manufacturer claims that its newest model of low-emission diesel car has 20% lower emissions than competing models. Okay. So, car manufacturer and its newest model, 20% lower emissions. So, than competing models. So there's, even though emissions data is regulated, car manufacturers have tampered with the data in the past. Okay. Okay. Number 23. The White House, we're in a new set of directions here, so let's go ahead and do that. So for the next group of studies, we want to identify at least one potential source of bias in the studies or claims. Explain why that bias would or would not affect your view of the study or the claim. Okay, so we're looking for bias here. 23 says, the White House claimed that 1.5 million people attended the 2016 inauguration. Okay, so what kind of bias could we have here? Well, there's a political bias going on, first of all. Okay, the White House wants to show, so this is like for President Trump. Okay, he was at the it was his presidency that started in the 2016 inauguration. Which, yeah, anyway. And so the White House claims that there was 1.5 million people, okay? So there's a political bias here, okay? Other reports, so this is the White House claiming, okay? So others reported between 250,000 and 900,000 people. Okay, so it's likely that the White House wants to promote their new president, and he wants to promote himself and all of the people that are now his workers at the White House. So there's a bit bias there. Based on a survey of 2718 people, 2,718 people, the National Opinion Research Center concluded that 33% of Americans always make a special effort to sort and recycle glass, cans, plastic, or paper, and 4% often make such an effort. Okay, so there doesn't look to be like any selection biases there because we have the National Opinion Research Center. So there should be no selection bias. But we need to be careful of, but self-reporting is used and people want to be seen as recyclers and care for the planet and care for Earth. Oops. Okay, so there's probably a bias that way. Number 25. Grocery shoppers on Saturday morning are invited to taste test orange juice and vote for their favorite brand. Okay, so there's a selection and participation bias may be present. So there's a selection bias. Because of the grocery shoppers on Saturday morning. Okay, because of the convenience sample. Okay, and then there's also participation bias. Because of people who like orange juice, who do taste tests and like orange juice. Okay, number 26. An article in the Journal of Nutrition noted that chocolate is rich in flavonoids. The article reports that the regular consumption of foods rich in flavonoids may reduce risk of coronary heart disease. This study received funding from Mars Inc., the candy company, and the Chocolate Manufacturers Association. Okay. So there's potential bias for conflict of interest, they call it. Okay. Or consider the source. Okay, Mars and the Chocolate Manufacturers Association want chocolate to be sold. Okay, so maybe flavonoids are good for you, but they could be tempted to exaggerate the results. Okay. 27. Based on a Pew Research Center survey of 35,000 American adults, the percentages of four-year college degree holders among Hindus, atheists, Muslims, and Catholics and all American adults are 77%, 43%, 39%, 27%, and 26% respectively. Okay, what do we think? Well, this is again a self-reporting. Okay, so they're going to present themselves in the best light. Okay, but the motivation to skew data is low. Okay, so these results should be free from bias. Okay, so self-reporting maybe it's not likely, but maybe all the Hindus got together and wanted to report themselves in the best light, so because they have the highest percentages of these groups of four-year college degree holders. Okay, but not real likely. And the Pew Research Center is good at doing good samples, ethical studies. Okay. 28. According to a New York Times CBS poll, okay, so that's pretty good, reliable polling service, 60% of baseball fans are bothered by steroid use by players, and 44% say that those who use steroids should not be allowed in the Baseball Hall of Fame. Okay, so the polling organization is reputable. And likely used random sampling to avoid bias. Okay, just going to do a quick save. And going back to here, number 29. Based on interviews with about 175,000 adults, a Gallup poll, okay, so there's a Gallup poll, is a good company to do surveys, they found that Mississippi is the most religious state and claimed 59% claiming to be very religious, and Vermont is the least one, 21% claiming to be very religious. So again, here we have self-reporting. If the participants know that this is a survey based off of their religious beliefs, compared to every other state in the nation, people who feel that they're very religious might skew their results. Okay. This is an interview, so I think that they were able to not have any survey issues, so interviews are good. Self-reporting could be an issue, though. They could, in an interview, participants want to say what they think the researcher is looking for. They want to portray themselves in the best light. Okay, so all of those things could be issues, but the study should be free from bias. Anyway. Okay, and then number 30, a study published in the Canadian Medical Association Journal of 20 nations discovered that Germany has the highest average number of annual visits to a doctor, 8.5, while Finland has the fewest, 3.2. Okay, so this should have no reason to distort data. Okay, because it's readily available. And easy to interpret. Okay, so there's those comments on those studies.